I was standing behind the glass door holding hot steaks when I heard my husband say that he doubted this joke of a marriage would last another year. They laughed. I smiled and said, "Why wait?" My name is Rebecca Hartwell. I'm 38 years old, and I'm the CEO of a digital marketing company valued at $12 million. I built it from the ground up, every client, every contract, every strategy that put us on the map. But that Thursday in June, standing in my own backyard hearing my husband call me a joke, none of it mattered. Before I tell you how I got to that moment, I need to go back to the beginning, when everything looked perfect. I was 26 when I met Dominic Hartwell at a digital marketing conference in Seattle. He was on the panel of visionary entrepreneurs, talking about market disruption with a confidence that filled the auditorium. I was in the third row with my notebook, building my little freelance agency. After the talk, he came up to me during the coffee break. Perfect smile, immaculate suit. I told him about my agency, 2 small but loyal clients, big dreams. He leaned in, interested. "You've got potential. You just need someone who really understands business." Back then, that sounded like a compliment. Now I know it was the opposite. He saw in me everything he didn't have. Dominic was unemployed when we met, but he didn't call it that. He was between ventures, exploring opportunities. The cryptocurrency platform that went bankrupt, the market just wasn't ready. The meal kit service that never launched, the investors lacked vision. I bought every story. We started dating 3 weeks later. Dinners at restaurants I paid for, but he chose. Weekends where I worked while he read books about billionaires. He had strong opinions about everything. How I should price services, dress for meetings, talk to clients. "You're good, but you need someone who understands the bigger game," he'd say. I took it as care. It was control. 6 months later, he moved into my apartment. It wasn't a mutual decision. It just happened. First a drawer, then half the closet, then the key that never came back. He said it made financial sense. The truth was, he never looked for a job. He'd wake up at 10 while I was already on calls since 7. My money became our money. He started introducing himself as co-founder of my agency. At first I corrected him. Then I learned to stay quiet. We got married 2 years later in Napa Valley. A beautiful ceremony that I paid for, but he planned. 200 guests, mostly his. My parents came from Ohio. My sister Claire was maid of honor. "You're not very social, Becca." "It's good I bring this energy," he said. On our honeymoon in Santorini, he posted photos about couple entrepreneurship. I worked every morning from the hotel while he slept till noon. He posed for pictures and called it collaboration. The first 5 years were a silent climb. My agency grew. I hired employees. We bought a house in Queen Anne that I paid for with a contract bonus I closed on my own. But it was his house in conversations. "We bought it to start a family," he'd say. We tried for 2 years. Appointments I scheduled, tests I took, hormones that wrecked my body. 2 in your head, Becca. Relax. How do you relax when you run a company, manage a home, and carry all the emotional weight of a marriage alone? In the 6th year, we turned my agency into a formal company. Dominic loved being a co-founder with a generous salary. We're finally professionalizing. As if 6 years of my work had been amateur, we registered Morrison Digital Innovations, my maiden name. He wanted Hartwell Digital, but I insisted. We hired more people, rented an office downtown. I closed clients, supervised projects, worked until midnight. Dominic went to events, gave talks about entrepreneurship. His actual contribution? 0 contracts, 0 strategy. But he had the title and the ego. He started correcting me in meetings, interrupting presentations, questioning decisions in front of the team. Employees came to me in private because he was reversing my decisions publicly. "He's insecure," Sarah told me. I knew. But love meant protecting his ego, being big in private and small in public. I had normalized my own invisibility. Year 9, I closed a $3 million Samsung contract. Dominic was golfing in Palm Springs. When he came back, he gave an interview about our visionary strategy. That word erased my sweat. At the company party, he toasted, "This is what happens when you have vision." Everyone applauded. I smiled. Inside, something cracked. Year 10, I started noticing Thursdays. Every Thursday night, Dominic had guys' nights at our house. Nathan, Trevor, Marcus. I'd prepare food, set up the patio, then disappear. "It's important to have time with friends," he'd say. Thursdays started innocent. Poker, beers. But they got louder, longer, messier. I'd wake at 6 to the smell of whiskey. Glasses everywhere. He'd sleep till noon. I'd clean up. A year ago, I closed the Morrison Industries contract. The biggest in our history. 40% of annual revenue. I closed it alone while Dominic was in Cabo. When he came back, he casually asked if I had closed it. I did. He nodded. "Cool. I've got a few ideas." His ideas. My work. 3 months ago, Thursdays changed. They became secret. Dominic asked me not to come by. Just guy stuff. I obeyed because I was tired. I traveled more. Worked late. Now I know. Those 3 months were the time he needed to build a case against me. To fabricate false evidence, twist conversations. Photos of me working late as emotional neglect. Business discussions labeled controlling behavior. He turned my success into ammunition. His Thursday friends were accomplices. Which brings me back to that Thursday in June. That morning, I'd closed the Morrison expansion contract. I came home at 7 with expensive steaks, the perfect wine. The house was full, laughter spilling from the patio. I set the steaks on the grill, prepared the tray. I was just about to step outside when I heard through the door that he doubted this joke of a marriage would last another year, and that I wasn't even close to his level. Holding those hot steaks, seeing my wine in their hands, my furniture under their bodies, something inside me exploded, because what I heard next, through that glass door, wasn't just my husband mocking me. It was the detailed plan of how he intended to take everything I had built. I stood frozen behind that door for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. The tray was heavy in my arms, the steaks cooling, while my brain tried to process what I'd just heard. It wasn't only the words about our joke of a marriage. It was the tone, the ease with which he said it, the laughter that followed, loud and congratulatory, as if he'd just told the best joke of the night. Through the glass, I saw Nathan raise his glass in a toast, Trevor pat Dominic on the back, Marcus laughing so hard he wiped tears from his eyes. They were sitting on the furniture I'd chosen, drinking wine from my collection, eating appetizers I'd made, in the backyard of the house I paid for, and they were celebrating my humiliation as entertainment. I set the tray down on the small table by the door, my hands steady, even though my whole body trembled. They hadn't seen me yet. For a moment, I considered walking back inside, pretending I hadn't heard, keeping the peace like always. But then Nathan spoke, and his words froze me in place. "How long have you felt this way, man?" Nathan leaned forward with that masculine curiosity for someone else's drama. Dominic swirled the wine in his glass like someone who'd learned it from YouTube, not real tastings. "Months. Ever since Rebecca closed the Morrison contract, she's been acting like she single-handedly saved the company. Her ego lately is unbearable. Ego. He was calling my work ego. The contract that took 17 meetings, 3 revised proposals, and a final pitch I carried entirely while he was golfing in Palm Springs. The contract that represented 40% of our revenue and opened doors to 3 other Fortune 500 clients. That was ego? Marcus took a sip of my Chateau Margaux, the wine I'd been saving for our anniversary next month. "You built that company from nothing, man. She just got lucky with a few good quarters. Lucky." 10 years of hard work, sleepless nights, weekends sacrificed, midnight client calls, all reduced to luck. Dominic accepted this revision of history with a nod, as if it were fact, as if he hadn't been unemployed when we met, as if I hadn't turned my freelance operation into an agency while he chased one failed venture after another. The crypto trading platform that lost $60,000, the meal kit service that never launched, the meditation app that couldn't compete with free alternatives. Each failure ate through our savings that I built, while he promised the next idea would be the one. Trevor stood to grab another bottle from the outdoor wine fridge I'd installed. "You need someone who appreciates what you bring, Dom. Someone who understands that being a visionary isn't about the day-to-day grind. Visionary. That's what Dominic called himself at dinners while I handled the actual vision of growing our company. He cornered people with theories about disrupting industries while I closed deals, lectured on leadership philosophy while I led, preached strategy while I strategized, talked success while I delivered it. Rebecca changed, Dominic continued. his voice taking on the wounded tone of someone rehearsed. She used to support my dreams. Now she just throws numbers at me. Revenue this, profit margin that. She doesn't get that business is more than spreadsheets. Nathan laughed, the sound echoing across the patio I'd designed with a landscaper. Sounds like she turned into one of those corporate drones. No vision, just execution. Just execution. The execution that took us from home office to downtown suite with 23 employees. The execution that meant Dominic could drive a BMW, wear designer suits, golf at the country club, and host these Thursday gatherings where he apparently discussed how far beneath him I'd fallen. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Sarah, our senior developer. Morrison Industries loves the new campaign proposal. Ready to sign the expansion tomorrow. You did it again. Tomorrow. I had the biggest meeting in company history tomorrow. The contract that would double our revenue and solidify us as an industry player. And here was my husband, my business partner, the man whose name sat beside mine on every document, telling his friends our marriage was a joke. The thing is, Dominic said, pouring another glass, his fourth by my count. I've been documenting everything. Every time she makes a decision without me. Every time she undermines my authority with the team. My lawyer says I've got a strong case to get at least half the company, maybe more. His lawyer, Derek Polson from the country club, the one he said was just his racquetball partner. They'd been meeting about dividing assets I built while I was still building them. Smart man. Trevor lifted his glass again. Get your ducks in a row before she sees it coming. She won't see it coming, Dominic said confidently, buoyed by wine and an echo chamber of validation. Rebecca thinks she's so smart with her presentations and contracts, but she doesn't understand the real game being played here. The real game. The game where he'd been plotting to destroy me while sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, living off my success. The game where he'd convinced his friends, and probably himself, that I was the lucky one. I picked up the tray of steaks, now cold enough to need reheating. Through the glass, I watched the four of them, men who had eaten at my table dozens of times, whose birthdays I'd remembered, whose wives I'd comforted through their own marital issues, who benefited from my hospitality, while apparently believing I was beneath their friend. The Thursday nights made sense now. They weren't poker games or brainstorming sessions. They were planning meetings for my humiliation. Every week, while I worked late or traveled for business, they'd been reinforcing Dominic's delusions, feeding his ego, helping him build a narrative where he was the victim of his ungrateful wife's success. I pushed open the French doors, the tray still in my hands, the steaks forgotten and cold. 4 heads turned toward me in perfect sync, laughter dying mid-breath. Dominic's crystal glass froze halfway to his lips, the amber liquid inside catching the glow of the patio lights I'd hung the previous summer. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the faint hum of the neighbor's pool filter. Rebecca. Dominic's voice cracked my name, shifting from confident storyteller to teenager caught red-handed in a single breath. We were just, why wait a year? I set the tray down on the side table with deliberate calm, my voice carrying the same measured tone I use when firing underperforming vendors. Let's end it tonight. I wouldn't want you to endure another 12 months married to someone so beneath you. Nathan's face went white. Trevor suddenly found his phone fascinating. Marcus took a step back, nearly knocking over the citronella candle I'd lit earlier to keep mosquitoes away. But Dominic, my husband of 12 years, the man who vowed to love and honor me before 200 guests, just stared at me, mouth slightly open, no words coming out for the first time in his life. I turned and walked back through the French doors, leaving them frozen in their tableau of guilt. My footsteps echoed down the hardwood hallway as I went straight to our bedroom. Behind me, I heard frantic whispers, chairs scraping concrete, the panic of men caught not just gossiping, but conspiring. The master closet held my Samsonite luggage set, a gift to myself after closing our first $1 million contract. I pulled out the largest and opened it on the bed we'd shared for 5 years in this house. My hands moved with surgical precision, folding blazers I'd worn to meetings Dominic skipped, packing jewelry I'd bought myself after each major business milestone, gathering designer bags that symbolized bonuses he claimed as our success, though he hadn't earned a cent of them. From the bathroom, I collected my skincare routine, the expensive serums and creams I invested in, because caring for myself was one of the few things I could control while managing both a business and a marriage to someone who resented my success. The medicine cabinet held my prescriptions, vitamins, the sleeping pills I'd needed more often as Dominic's Thursday nights grew longer and louder. I heard footsteps on the stairs, multiple pairs, hesitant and uneven. They were coming up like children approaching a parent they'd disappointed, unsure whether they'd face anger, disappointment, or something worse, indifference. "Rebecca, please, can we talk about this?" Dominic appeared in the doorway, hair once perfectly styled, now disheveled from running his hands through it. Behind him stood Nathan, his face a mix of guilt and something else. Relief, maybe? "There's nothing to talk about." I zipped up my toiletry bag and placed it in the suitcase. "You've made your position perfectly clear. I'm beneath you. Our marriage is a joke. You've been meeting with Derek Polson about divorce proceedings. What exactly would you like to discuss?" The color drained from his face at the mention of Derek. "How did you know?" "The same way I know about the separate bank account you opened in January. The same way I know you've been telling potential investors I'm emotionally unstable and sabotaging the company with my ego." Nathan stepped forward behind Dominic, and something in his expression made it all click. The guilt wasn't just about tonight. It was older, heavier, carrying the weight of prolonged betrayal. "It was you," I said, locking eyes with Nathan. "You sent me that anonymous message an hour ago. Check your husband's Thursday meetings. You need to know what he's saying about you." Dominic spun toward his best friend, face twisting with a rage I'd never seen directed at anyone but me. "You warned her." Nathan straightened his shoulders, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked like an adult instead of an overgrown frat brother. "I've been sending her screenshots for 3 weeks, Dom. Every message in our group chat where you talked about hiding assets, every discussion about Project Gaslight, every time you bragged about how you were going to take half of everything Rebecca built while painting her as the villain. Project Gaslight." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You actually named it like it was a military operation instead of just destroying your wife's reputation." Trevor and Marcus had crept up the stairs, drawn by the drama they'd helped create. They stood in the hallway like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Their previous bravado evaporated in the face of real consequences. "The Thursday meetings," Nathan continued, voice gaining strength, "were never about poker. They were planning sessions. Dom would share his latest strategy for documenting your supposed instability, taking photos of you working late to prove you neglected the marriage, recording conversations out of context, building a case that you were the problem while he was the suffering husband trying to hold it all together." I folded my last dress, the red one I'd worn at the company Christmas party where Dominic gave a speech about partnership and shared success, while I knew he hadn't contributed anything to our quarterly numbers. "And you all just went along with it." Marcus began, "We thought," then stopped, realizing there was no acceptable way to finish that sentence. "You thought what?" I faced them. All these men who'd eaten at my table, whose birthdays I'd remembered, whose wives I'd comforted through their own marital issues, who'd benefited from my hospitality while apparently believing I deserved to be destroyed for daring to succeed. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Dominic's hands opened and closed at his sides, his jaw tightening as he searched for words that might salvage the situation. But we both knew there were none. "You can't unsay what I heard. You can't undo 3 months of plotting my destruction. You can't take back that I wasn't even close to his level when the evidence of whose level was whose surrounded us, in the house I bought with money I earned." I closed the bedroom door behind me and walked downstairs with my suitcase, unaware that inside the boxes Nathan would bring at midnight, I'd discover that Dominic's betrayal went far. I closed the bedroom door with a soft click that sounded louder than any fist could have. The wheels of my suitcase whispered over the carpet as I passed the gallery wall with our wedding photos. Each frame was a monument to promises that, it turned out, meant nothing to Dominic. Behind the door, I heard voices raised. Dominic turning his fury on Nathan, the same friend who finally developed a conscience after 3 months of complicity. The elevator in our building moved with excruciating slowness, giving me far too much time to think about what I was leaving behind. Not just the house or the marriage, but the version of myself who believed love meant endless commitment, who minimized her own accomplishments to protect a fragile ego, who paid the bills while pretending not to notice her husband was planning her downfall with his Thursday night conspirators. The Marriott downtown glowed against the night sky, its glass facade reflecting the city I had conquered. one client at a time, while Dominic played at being a businessman. I crossed the lobby with my shoulders straight, refusing to look like a woman fleeing her home. The front desk attendant, a young woman with gentle eyes and a professional smile, didn't ask questions when I booked an executive suite for a week, using the credit card Dominic didn't know existed. My emergency fund, built with bonuses I never mentioned because I learned years ago that financial independence was oxygen in a suffocating marriage. The suite on the 23rd floor had floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the business district, where tomorrow I still had to face executives from Morrison Industries, pretending that my life hadn't just imploded. The space was sterile and perfect. No memories embedded in the furniture. No ghosts of better times haunting the corners. No trace of 18-year-old scotch or false laughter. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left home. Dominic's name appeared repeatedly on the screen. The messages progressed through predictable stages. First, anger. You're being dramatic. Come back now. Then manipulation. You misunderstood everything. We need to talk. The fake apology. I didn't mean it like you heard it. And finally, the threats. You are destroying our company with this scene. Investors will pull out if they hear about this. I placed the phone on the marble counter in the bathroom and turned on the shower, letting the water heat until steam filled the space. Standing under the rain shower, water crashing over me with a pressure our home shower never reached, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. 12 years. I spent 12 years building a life with someone who was documenting my destruction all along, even gathering evidence of a war I didn't know we were fighting. The tears came then, mixing with the water from the shower, my sobs echoing in the marble walls where no one could hear them. I stayed under that water until it cooled, until my skin wrinkled and my eyes were puffy, until I cried not just the betrayal, but the humiliation of not having seen it sooner. All those Thursday nights when I cooked for his meetings, all those mornings when I kissed him goodbye before calls while he slept till noon, all those presentations where he stood beside me taking credit for work he never did. I was performing in a play where everyone knew the ending except me. When I stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, the sun had set completely. The city below looked different from this height. Smaller, manageable, like a problem that could be solved with the right strategy. I ordered room service, not because I was hungry, but because I needed to remember how to care for myself without factoring someone else's preferences. Salmon instead of steak, Pinot Grigio instead of bourbon, chocolate soufflé, because Dominic used to call dessert unnecessary calories, and I had forgotten how to be unnecessary. Patricia Winters answered the phone on the second ring, even though it was after 9. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had been waiting for this call. I've been waiting to hear from you, Rebecca. Nathan Blackstone has already sent me an overview of your situation. That stopped me mid-fork full of salmon. Nathan got in touch? About 2 hours ago. He wants to make sure you have everything you need to protect yourself and the company. He's ready to give sworn testimony about Dominic's financial manipulation and the conspiracy to manufacture evidence of your instability. Patricia's tone was factual, as if husbands plotting the destruction of their wives were just another Tuesday in her life. Can you meet tomorrow at 8 a.m? My office. Bring anything you have. Bank statements, company records, communication logs, everything. I agreed, then spent the next 3 hours organizing files on my laptop, creating folders with the kind of labeling precision that made our company successful. Failed Ventures of Dominic contained documentation of every dollar I invested in his dreams, $60,000 in the crypto platform, $40,000 in the meal kit service, $30,000 in the meditation app that never launched. Company contributions held each contract I closed, every client I recruited, every midnight call I answered while Dominic's office stayed dark. Financial manipulation would soon hold whatever Nathan was about to deliver. At midnight, I heard a knock on my door that froze me. Through the peephole, I saw Nathan standing in the corridor, smaller than I had ever seen him, holding 3 stacked cardboard boxes. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine shame. I opened the door without speaking, stepping aside to let him in. He placed the boxes on the coffee table, then stood awkwardly in the center of the suite, hands in pockets like a teenager caught stealing. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know this doesn't fix anything, but you should know that watching him poison everyone against you while you literally kept the company afloat, it's been eating at me for months. Then why did you go along for so long? I asked, genuinely trying to understand how someone could watch this manipulation unfold week after week and stay silent. He sank onto the sofa, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that made him look exhausted. At first, I thought he was just venting. You know how guys complain about their marriages. But then, it turned into something else. He started taking notes during calls, screenshots of your texts out of context, building this whole narrative where you were the villain, and we simply let him. I opened the first box, finding manila folders labeled in Dominic's handwriting, financial discrepancies, emotional instability evidence, asset plan. Inside were printed emails I'd sent about normal business operations, annotated with his interpretations. A message about working late became proof of marital abandonment. A request to review contracts became controlling behavior. He twisted every interaction into evidence for a story that only existed in his head. This goes back to January, I said, holding a folder dated 5 months ago. He's been planning this since the beginning of the year. Nathan nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Shortly after you closed the Samsung contract, that's when he really flipped. Before that, he could pretend he was your equal, but that deal made it clear who was really running the show. His ego couldn't handle it. The second box contained something worse. Photographs. Photos of me at my desk at 10 p.m. taken through the office window. Screenshots of my LinkedIn posts about our company's growth, highlighted and annotated about my narcissistic need for attention. Even photos of my sister Claire's birthday dinner, where apparently my 2 glasses of wine were proof of a drinking problem. He asked us to help, Nathan continued, voice just a whisper. Trevor was supposed to report if he saw you lunching with male clients. Marcus monitored your social feeds looking for anything he could twist. I was assigned to observe your relationship with the team and flag any sign of what Dominic called improper professional boundaries. The third box was the most damaging. Financial records, but not just ours. Dominic had been setting up a parallel company, registering an LLC in Delaware, even approaching our clients with a new venture he planned to launch soon. The name on the paperwork, Morrison Strategic Solutions, deliberately similar to our company, Morrison Digital Innovations. Close enough to confuse clients, but different enough to claim coincidence. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Emergency. Dominic just sent email to the whole team claiming you're having a mental health crisis and he's taking temporary charge of operations. What should I do? I showed the message to Nathan. His face turned pale. He's escalating faster than we thought. I called Patricia immediately, putting it on speakerphone. Dominic just emailed the whole company claiming I'm having a mental health crisis. Forward it to me now, Patricia said, voice sharp. I'm filing an emergency injunction. This crosses into defamation and potential fraud. Nathan, are you there? Yes, he answered, sitting up. I'll send everything I have on that so-called Project Gaslight immediately. Every message, every meeting note, every scrap of evidence. Rebecca, do not respond to that email. Do not contact your team directly yet. Let me handle this legally first. After Patricia hung up, Nathan and I worked in silence, organizing documents, making digital backups, building the case that would protect not just my company, but my reputation. At 2 a.m, he finally asked the question I had been dreading. Do you hate me for not speaking up earlier? I considered lying, offering forgiveness I didn't feel yet, but I was tired of dishonesty. I don't know what I feel about you, Nathan. You watched my husband plan my destruction for months. You participated in it. The fact you woke up eventually doesn't erase that. He nodded, accepting the judgment. For what it's worth, Sophie threatened to leave if I didn't speak up. She said if I could watch this happen to you, I'd do the same to her one day. Smart woman, I said, genuinely. Sophie had seen what I lost. That somebody who could participate in that level of deceit was capable of anything. My phone rang at 3 a.m, a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Rebecca, it's Linda, Trevor's wife. Her voice was shaky, as if she were crying. I just found out what they've been doing. Trevor came home drunk from your house tonight and told me everything. I'm disgusted. Trevor had been coming home from those Thursday nights and bragging about what they discussed. He thought it was funny to watch Dominic plan this elaborate scheme. I started recording after the 3rd week because something felt wrong. I have hours of him describing their plans, laughing about how you had no idea what they were pulling. Another ally emerging from an unexpected corner. Can I send it to your lawyer? I already uploaded it to Drive in the Cloud. I'll send you the link. Rebecca, I'm filing for divorce too. If Trevor could join something so cruel, what else is he capable of? What would he do to me if I earned more than him or made him feel small? After Linda hung up, I stood at the window watching the city asleep below. Somewhere out there, Dominic was probably pacing our house, realizing that his carefully built plan was collapsing. His friends were turning on him. His lawyer would see the evidence and advise surrender. The team he tried to manipulate would choose the person who actually built their careers. Nathan stood to leave at 4 a.m., putting on his coat in movements that looked painful. At the door, he turned back one last time. The ironic thing is, Dominic was never beneath your level, Rebecca. You would have carried him forever if he'd been grateful instead of resentful. You loved him enough to make him equal even when he wasn't. That's what he never understood. I closed the door behind Nathan and sat alone in my hotel suite, watching the sunrise over the city. 4 hours of sleep would have to suffice. Today's investor meeting would determine not just my company's future, but whether Dominic's carefully built narrative would collapse under the weight of evidence. I took a quick shower, put on my sharpest black suit, the one I wore when closing the Samsung deal, and applied makeup to hide the exhaustion that threatened to show. Patricia called while I was leaving the hotel. The emergency order passed. Dominic is legally barred from accessing company accounts or making operational decisions without board approval. He will be notified this morning, likely well before the meeting. He's going to be furious. Let him be. Anger makes people sloppy. Also sent the evidence package to every board member individually. They'll have had time to review before the full meeting. The office building rose against the morning sky like a monument to everything I built. I arrived at 6 a.m., using my key card to enter through the executive entrance. The building was almost empty, only security and the night cleaning staff who nodded to me. They had seen me here at all hours over the years. Unlike Dominic, whose badge rarely logged in before 10. Nathan was already in the conference room organizing printed documents with metered precision. He'd changed clothes but hadn't slept either, judging by the stack of coffee cups on the side table. We worked without speaking initially, creating evidence stations around the room. Financial records on one side, client testimonies on another. The project Gaslight documentation displayed prominently where Dominic would have to face it. He'll try to spin this as a marital dispute, not business, Nathan said, adjusting the projection screen. That's his opening move. Make it personal, not professional. And when he does, I said, that's when you show slide 17, his LLC registration for the competing company. Nothing screams professional betrayal like trying to steal your own clients while still getting paid. Sarah arrived at 8 with her laptop and a grave expression. Half the team is ready to testify if necessary. The other half is updating resumes in case this falls apart. But what none of us knew was that Dominic had one last desperate move, and he would play it just as the board voted on my continuance. The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, the kind of sterile chill that comes from fear dressed as formality. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, cutting long shadows across the table where 12 people sat, half of them already aware of the storm about to hit. Dominic entered like a man walking into his own movie, navy suit, smug composure, eyes sweeping over the room as if he were still the protagonist of this story. Patricia sat to my left, a silent wall of steel in a dark blazer. Nathan was opposite us, flipping through the thick folder labeled Project Gaslight. My pulse was steady, almost unnaturally so, the way it gets when your body realizes panic is useless. I'd stopped trembling sometime around dawn. The chairman, a soft-spoken man named Reynolds, cleared his throat and began the meeting. He spoke of company performance, client satisfaction, market projections, all background noise to the war waiting underneath. Dominic let him finish before sliding a document across the table, rehearsed smile in place. Before we move forward, I think it's time we discuss the elephant in the room, Rebecca's erratic behavior and its effect on leadership stability. A few heads turned toward me, eyes flickering between curiosity and discomfort. Patricia didn't move. She simply said, "Erratic behavior is a serious accusation. Evidence?" Dominic gestured toward a folder in front of him like a magician about to perform a trick. Inside were the same twisted documents Nathan had delivered to me the night before. Emails, screenshots, photographs. all annotated to support the illusion of a woman spiraling out of control. But this time, the illusion collapsed before it could breathe. Patricia leaned forward, perfectly calm, and placed another folder on the table, identical, but thicker. Interesting that you'd present fabricated evidence, Mr. Hartwell. We have the originals, metadata intact, and these, she slid out several printed screenshots, show the messages you and your associates sent while plotting to stage this narrative. You called it Project Gaslight. The silence that followed was surgical. Reynolds adjusted his glasses, scanning the evidence. One by one, the board members looked at Dominic, watching his practiced confidence melt into something feral. That's absurd, he said too quickly. Nathan's trying to frame me. Nathan didn't flinch. You sent me those files yourself, Dom. You even joked about the Dropbox name, Gaslight Drop. I have the timestamps. Patricia nodded. And Delaware business registration records show you filed for Morrison Strategic Solutions 3 months ago. That's corporate fraud and conflict of interest. The Department of Justice has already been notified. Dominic's face turned the color of old paper. His jaw flexed, his composure collapsing in increments. For a moment, I thought he might lunge across the table. Instead, he laughed. It was an awful sound. High, brittle, and entirely out of place. This is ridiculous. She's spinning a conspiracy because she can't handle being questioned. Patricia stood, voice calm but cold. You're suspended effective immediately. Security will escort you out after you hand over your company devices. He rose slowly, hands flat on the table, eyes locking onto mine. You think you've won, he said, but you don't even know what I have. Security appeared at the door, 2 men in black suits, and Dominic's eyes darted between them and me. Don't touch me, he snapped, but his voice broke halfway through. The men didn't need to. He gathered his laptop, his phone, his wounded pride, and left without looking back. When the door shut behind him, the silence was thick enough to taste. Reynolds exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Rebecca, he said, tone gentler now, take the rest of the day off. We'll handle this. But there was no rest left in me. I thanked him, packed my notes, and left the building through the same doors I'd entered 12 years ago as a dreamer. Only this time, I wasn't chasing approval. I was reclaiming ownership. Outside, the summer air felt heavier, pressing against my lungs. Reporters already knew something. A few stood across the street with cameras, shouting questions about corporate betrayal and marital scandal. I kept walking, eyes forward, until I reached the corner cafe where I'd written my first business plan years ago. The barista, the same one from back then, looked up and smiled faintly, as if recognizing the ghost of someone she once admired. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window, letting the chaos unfold somewhere far away. For the first time in years, I didn't have to check messages, fix problems, or pretend everything was fine. By afternoon, my phone began lighting up again. Some messages were from employees. We stand with you. Others from journalists I didn't owe answers to. Then one came from an unknown number. A video file. No message attached. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Dominic's face filled the screen. He looked wild, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. You think you destroyed me? He said. You think I'll let you walk away with everything? Watch what happens when truth comes out. He turned the camera toward a stack of papers, gesturing like a man revealing prophecy. You're not innocent, Rebecca. I have proof you siphoned company funds to your personal accounts. My stomach twisted. Then I saw the logo at the top of the document, an old design template I had deleted 5 years ago. He'd photoshopped it. I sent the file to Patricia immediately. Within minutes, she confirmed what I already knew. It's fake, but dangerous. He's trying to control the narrative before the truth lands. And then she added, we're filing a restraining order tonight. Don't go home. Not yet. I looked out the window. Across the street, a black car sat parked too long, engine idling. The driver's face was hidden behind sunglasses. My pulse accelerated. Patricia, I whispered. I think he's here. Her voice hardened. Do not approach. I'm sending a security team to your hotel. Leave through the back exit. Now. I moved quickly, slipping out through the kitchen, past startled employees. Outside, the alley smelled like old coffee and rain. My heels clicked on the wet pavement as I walked toward the parking garage 2 blocks away. Every echo felt amplified. When I reached the corner, headlights flashed. The same black car turned onto the street, following slowly. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time just 3 words. We're not done. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the Marriott lobby. The security team was already waiting. 2 ex-military professionals hired by Patricia's firm. One stayed by the elevator, the other outside my door all night. I didn't sleep. Every sound, the hum of the air conditioner, the elevator bell, sounded like footsteps. Around 3 a.m., Patricia texted, "Court order confirmed. He's forbidden from approaching you or contacting any company personnel." Relief was a fragile thing. It came and went in waves, never lasting long enough to feel real. By morning, the news had exploded. CEO exposes husband's corporate deception, trended on every platform. Photos from the board meeting leaked, me sitting calm while Dominic looked seconds from losing control. The comments were brutal, but mixed. Half the internet called me hero. The other half called me manipulative. I learned something then. Victory doesn't come clean. It comes splattered in misunderstanding. At noon, Sarah called. "Dominic just showed up at the office," she whispered. Security stopped him, but he's screaming about missing files and lawsuits. Patricia's team handled it. The police arrived within minutes, and Dominic was escorted out for the second time in 24 hours. This time, his rage didn't look powerful. It looked small. The kind of fury that only comes when a narcissist realizes the audience has left the theater. That night, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, watching the city lights flicker across the window. My hands finally stopped shaking. I thought about how control had been his oxygen, and now he was suffocating in the vacuum he'd created. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt empty. There's a specific kind of grief that comes after surviving manipulation. It's not sadness for what you lost, but for the person you had to become to survive it. When the call came from the police 2 days later, I was already expecting it. Dominic had violated the restraining order. He'd been arrested near our house, parked across the street with a camera and laptop full of unsent messages. They said he'd been drinking. They also said he asked one question before they took him in. "Did she win?" I didn't answer. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about finally putting down the sword. The next morning, Patricia called again, voice tight. "He made bail. And Rebecca, he's not done. He filed a counter lawsuit accusing you of fraud." Patricia's voice was steady, but I could hear the fatigue underneath it. "He filed at dawn, Rebecca. It's an attempt to flip the narrative, claiming that you used company funds for personal gain." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to the bridge of my nose. "He's doubling down. That's what narcissists do when they lose control," she said. "They create chaos to stay relevant. Don't respond emotionally. Let me dismantle it." That morning, I didn't go into the office. I couldn't. I walked instead, miles through downtown, past coffee shops and bookstores, and people who had no idea that my name was trending under headlines like "Power Couple Implodes." My reflection followed me in every window, composed from afar, but fraying around the edges. I stopped at a park bench and sat for a long time, watching strangers pass, each living their own quiet wars. For the first time, I realized how small mine really was in the universe, but it still hurt like hell. By noon, Patricia texted, "His motion will fail. The paper trail is clean." I stared at those words and didn't feel relief, just exhaustion. Dominic was playing a game I no longer wanted to win. The more he pushed, the more I saw the truth. My real freedom wasn't in defeating him. It was in detaching completely. That night, I went to my parents' house in Ohio. I hadn't been there in years. The drive was long, but the silence was healing. My mother opened the door before I even rang the bell. She didn't ask questions. She just held me. My father made tea and turned on the old record player in the living room. Nina Simone's voice filled the air like something sacred. I hadn't cried in front of anyone since that night behind the glass door. I cried now. My mother just stroked my hair and whispered, "You don't have to be strong tonight." Over the next few days, the adrenaline faded. In its place came a quiet kind of collapse. My body finally registered what my mind had been carrying for years: sleepless nights, constant tension, the slow erosion of safety. I woke up every morning at 5 a.m., heart pounding, half expecting to find Dominic standing over me. Trauma doesn't end when the person leaves. It ends when your nervous system finally believes you're safe. Mine didn't. Not yet. Patricia called every day with updates. Dominic's counter-lawsuit was unraveling quickly. His lawyer had withdrawn after seeing the falsified documents. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation. On him. "You're winning," she said one night. "This will be over soon." But I wasn't sure I even wanted to call it winning. You don't win wars like this. You just survive them and try to build something worth living for afterward. A week later, Nathan visited. He looked thinner, older somehow. Guilt has a way of aging people. We sat on my parents' porch drinking lemonade, the same way I had as a kid when the world was still simple. "He's unraveling," Nathan said. "He's sending messages to investors, clients, anyone who'll listen, trying to convince them you're unstable." "And?" I asked. "They're not buying it. Most of them already cut ties with him." He hesitated before continuing. "You know, Sophie left me." I looked at him, unsure what to say. She said she couldn't stand living with someone who stayed quiet for so long, that she saw in me what you saw in Dominic. Cowardice disguised as loyalty. He swallowed hard. "She's right." There was nothing to say. Some truths don't need dialogue. The following morning, my mother handed me an old photo album. "You were always building things," she said. "When you were 10, you sold lemonade with a business plan. When you were 16, you ran your first website. You've been creating since before you met him. Don't let him rewrite that." I spent hours flipping through the pages. Childhood photos, school projects, letters from friends. Every picture looked like a version of me I'd lost track of somewhere along the way. That evening, as I packed to leave, my father walked me to the car. "You remind me of your grandmother," he said. "She built her own business when women weren't supposed to. People doubted her, called her cold, difficult, but she just kept going. You come from that." His words stayed with me the entire drive back to Chicago. When I returned, the city looked different. The skyline wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a blank canvas. I rented a small apartment overlooking the lake, filled it with light and silence. The first night there, I slept for 10 uninterrupted hours. No dreams, just peace. The next day, Sarah and a few team members came by. They brought takeout and laptops, setting up an impromptu workspace in my living room. "The company needs direction," Sarah said gently. "We can rebuild, Rebecca, without him." For the first time, the idea didn't feel exhausting. It felt right. We spent the afternoon sketching out a new structure, new branding, new leadership. Morrison Digital Innovations would live again, but as mine alone. That night, I stood on my balcony watching the water shimmer under the moonlight. For the first time in a decade, I could breathe without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dominic's voice, once omnipresent in my head, was fading into static. I whispered into the night, almost like a prayer, "You don't control me anymore." The next morning, Patricia called with the final update. The judge dismissed his claims. The restraining order remains. You're legally free of him. I thanked her quietly. Freedom sounded different when you'd paid for it in pieces of your soul. I decided to take a break from everything. A friend owned a cabin near Lake Michigan, and she offered it for as long as I needed. The air there was sharp and clean, smelling of pine and salt. The first few days, I barely spoke. I hiked. I read. I cooked for one. Healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives quietly, in small choices that add up to something whole. One morning, I walked along the shoreline at sunrise, sand cold beneath my feet. A seagull flew overhead, its reflection mirrored perfectly on the still water. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Dominic. Not even at myself. Anger had been armor. I didn't need it now. Back in the cabin, I found an envelope on the doorstep. No name. No return address. Inside was a note, typed, short. "I hope you're happy, because I'm not done." My stomach turned, but I didn't panic this time. I sent it to Patricia, who confirmed the handwriting was his. "He's bluffing," she said. "We'll file another report." I nodded. For the first time, his threats didn't feel like chains. They felt like noise, fading, irrelevant. That night, thunder rolled over the lake, and rain tapped softly against the windows. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the fire, For once, I didn't think about what came next. I just existed, breathing, surviving, living. The next morning, I decided to return to the city, to face whatever remained of my old life. I didn't know that within 48 hours, I would see Dominic again for the first time since the boardroom, in the most ordinary place imaginable. The city felt smaller when I came back, not in size, but in weight. The buildings weren't monuments anymore. They were reminders. I walked past the glass tower where the boardroom confrontation had happened, half expecting to feel something heavy. Instead, I felt nothing. Numbness, I learned, was a sign of healing. You stop reacting because you finally stop bleeding. I went straight to the office that afternoon. Sarah had handled everything beautifully in my absence. The new branding was sleek, minimalist, powerful. My name wasn't hidden anymore. "You okay being back?" she asked, handing me a coffee. "I think so," I said. "I just want to build again, but slower this time." She smiled. "Then let's start there." The weeks that followed were quiet. Meetings replaced arguments. Progress replaced survival. For the first time in a decade, I worked without walking on eggshells. Employees started laughing again. The office felt alive. I realized how much space Dominic had taken up, not just physically, but energetically. His absence was a kind of light. One Thursday, after a long meeting with a potential client, I stopped by Whole Foods to pick up dinner. It was late, almost closing time. I walked through the aisles in my usual post-meeting fog, choosing vegetables I might not even cook. And then, halfway down the pasta aisle, I saw him, Dominic. He looked smaller. His once perfect posture was gone, his suit rumpled, his face unshaven. He was holding a basket with a frozen pizza and a bottle of cheap bourbon. For a split second, our eyes met. Time stretched and collapsed all at once. There was no music, no dramatic confrontation. Just two people standing in fluorescent light, surrounded by boxes of macaroni, realizing what they'd become. He was the first to speak. "Rebecca." His voice cracked slightly like an old record. I didn't answer. I just nodded once, polite, like acknowledging a stranger. He tried again. "You look different." I almost laughed. "I am." He swallowed hard. "You destroyed me." The words came out not as accusation, but confession. I took a step closer. Not in anger, but clarity. "No, Dominic. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening." He looked down, shoulders shaking once, and for a brief moment, I saw the boy he must have been before the ego consumed him. Someone who wanted to matter. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," I said, "when I need to remember what silence feels like." I turned, leaving him there among the shelves. The click of my heels on the tile was the only sound between us. Outside, the air was cool, crisp. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. The encounter hadn't broken me. It had freed me. There's a strange peace in realizing the person who once terrified you no longer has access to your nervous system. I got into my car, turned on the radio, and drove home without looking back. That night, I cooked dinner for one. Real food, not takeout or leftovers. I poured a glass of wine, played Nina Simone again, and let the quiet fill the room. Healing didn't look like victory. It looked like making pasta at 9 p.m. in peace. A few days later, Sarah told me Morrison Industries had renewed their contract. "They said they've never seen leadership handle crisis like you did," she said. "They want you to keynote their annual conference." I hesitated. "Do you think I should?" She smiled. "You don't owe silence to anyone anymore." So I said yes. Standing on that stage weeks later, facing hundreds of executives, I told the story, not the gossip version, but the truth, about resilience, gaslighting, rebuilding from ashes. When I finished, the room stood in silence, then applause. But it wasn't the applause that stayed with me. It was the quiet after, when I realized I had finally reclaimed my own narrative. Life became simpler after that. Work was stable, friendships real, nights restful. Therapy helped me untangle the threads Dominic had knotted inside me. I learned how to sleep again, how to trust again, how to enjoy my own company. Freedom wasn't fireworks. It was waking up and not feeling dread. One evening, Nathan called out of the blue. "I thought you should know," he said, voice hesitant. "Dominic left Chicago. Rumor is he moved to Arizona. No one's heard from him since. I sat there for a long moment, letting the words sink in. Then I said, softly, "Let him go." Months passed. Seasons changed. I began teaching a mentorship program for women in business, helping them navigate what I once thought I'd never escape. Each story I heard reminded me why I survived. Not for revenge, not for triumph, but for meaning. Then one night, Sarah sent an invitation that made my chest tighten. "Nathan and Sophie are getting married," she said. "They want you there. Nathan especially." I hesitated at first, unsure if I could face that part of my past. But healing means showing up, even when your voice shakes. I RSVP'd yes. The wedding was beautiful. Small, intimate, nothing like mine had been. Nathan spotted me across the room and smiled. We hadn't spoken in months, but it didn't matter. Forgiveness doesn't need words when it's already been lived. As the reception went on, I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time in years. The light felt different on my skin, softer, earned. When the band started playing, Nathan took the microphone for a speech. He looked nervous, scanning the crowd until his eyes met mine. He raised his glass, voice trembling slightly. "There's someone here tonight who reminded me what courage looks like," he began. "And she deserves to hear this in front of everyone." Nathan's voice trembled, but his eyes never left mine. "There's someone here tonight who reminded me what real courage looks like. Someone who taught me that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. Rebecca, you showed me that owning your mistakes doesn't make you small. It makes you human." The crowd turned to look at me. My chest tightened, not from embarrassment, but from something purer, acceptance. He raised his glass higher. "To Rebecca Hartwell, for surviving what most of us couldn't, and for teaching me that strength isn't about winning. It's about walking away when staying means losing yourself." The room erupted in applause. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. For the first time, tears weren't the language of my healing anymore. They had done their job. I simply nodded and lifted my glass. After the toast, I stepped outside for air. The night was warm, filled with the hum of laughter and the scent of roses. From the garden, I could see the string lights flickering softly, casting everything in gold. It looked like closure, like the kind of peace that doesn't need witnesses. Nathan joined me a few minutes later, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than I've been in years." We stood there in silence, watching fireflies dance above the grass. "He'd hate this," Nathan said suddenly. I laughed quietly. "I know." When the music shifted to something slower, Sophie waved Nathan back inside. He turned to me, hesitation in his eyes. "You deserve peace, Rebecca, and you finally look like you believe that." He left me with those words, disappearing into the glow of the celebration. I stayed under the stars a little longer, barefoot now, toes pressing into the cool earth. Peace, I thought, isn't something you find. It's something you allow. Back home that night, I placed my phone face down on the counter and poured the last of the champagne into a mug. The city outside pulsed softly, alive but distant. I thought about Dominic, not with anger, not even with pity, but with the detached compassion you give to a stranger from another life. His story had ended long before mine had begun again. Weeks passed. The company thrived under the new name, Hartwell Strategies. Investors returned, not because of publicity, but because they believed in the new culture we'd built, one rooted in authenticity, not appearances. I started mentoring young founders, especially women who had been dismissed, overshadowed, or silenced. Every time one of them found her voice, it felt like reclaiming a fragment of my own. One afternoon, I received a letter from a former employee I barely remembered. "You probably don't know this," it read, "but the day you walked out of that boardroom changed my life. I realized I was working under my own Dominic, someone who thrived on my silence. I quit that night. I started my own agency. Thank you." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my drawer beside the old ones I used to write to myself, proof that healing ripples outward. By autumn, I was invited to speak at another summit, this time not about survival, but about transformation. Standing on the stage, I told the audience that power without peace isn't power at all, that success measured in numbers, but not in peace of mind, is just another form of captivity. And as I spoke, I felt something inside me settle, like a final thread weaving itself back into place. After the conference, I went for a walk along the river. The trees were turning gold, the water reflecting light like liquid glass. I thought about everything that had brought me here. The glass door, the laughter, the betrayal, the silence, the survival. The pain hadn't vanished. It had transformed. It was no longer a wound. It was a scar that glowed in the right light. That night, I sat on my balcony with a journal open on my lap. The air smelled of rain and possibility. I wrote a single line. Peace isn't found in forgetting. It's found in remembering without breaking. Then I closed the notebook and watched the city breathe below me. Somewhere out there, 1,000 other women were standing behind their own glass doors, holding something heavy, wondering if they had the strength to walk away. They do, because I did. And as the night deepened, I realized that survival had never been the end of my story. It was the beginning of a life finally lived on my own terms.